Let's go. Welcome, welcome. Cathann, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Bree. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Um, my name is Cathann Dragone-Gutierrez. I use she, her pronouns. And I am a mental health provider in an independent school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have approximately 1,200 students, grades 6 through 12. This is my 22nd year as a mental health provider in schools. And during that time, I also spent a lot of number of years working in agencies, and I had the honor and privilege to work with Dr. Alicia Lieberman out of UCSF in getting my infant mental health endorsement. And for me, I bring this up because I came in I applied for this fellowship with certain thoughts and ideas about what I was stepping into and what I was hoping to get out of it. And I pretty quickly learned that it was going to be a very different experience for me. I thought maybe this would be a time for me to really hone on creating better policies and procedures for my school. And I had like various different, what I would say is kind of cognitive based sort of goals. um, but what occurred was really a very nourishing and rejuvenating space for myself. What we call in infant mental health, I would say, is like as a parallel process. So um, I we had and Jen, I think you're in the room, and so I just want to give a shout out to Jen Leland because she's the reason, kind of the person who kind of got me connected with SCRR after we had lost a student 2 years ago. And we had 4 losses in 3 years. And obviously, that had a very significant impact for me and my team professionally. But in addition, I had been diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer in the spring. And luckily, everything, is fine. But I did have 6 weeks of radiation. And so I started this fellowship probably days after that was completed. And I share that with you because um, what this fellowship has given me is really just a space to kind of be held, right? I just kind of would come into this group each week and realizing that what I needed was to be nourished and to be held. And so that's kind of the heart of what my capstone became about, was how can I create this sort of meaningful, nourishing experience for the department that I chair, which is a department of 5 mental health providers. How can I begin to um, give forward a bit of what I've received over the last 8 months from the fellowship? And so that's really the heart of what the capstone is about. And so I think we can go to the next slide. Wonderful. Thank you. There's also a handout, free, if you want to. Essentially, the handout is basically what I'm telling you, but I thought some people maybe like a more of a visual outline, so you have both. Um, so the capstone encompasses a few different parts. It started with a 4-hour retreat on March 4th. And I hired a expressive arts, somatic, trauma informed therapist to facilitate this retreat. And we created a body scan that incorporated art, obviously, and mindfulness. And you can see in one of the photos here the yoga mat and sort of a sketch of the body. And so we went through um, the body scan and would pause at different areas and sort of create, what words were coming forward, what colors, what images. um, and that went on to lead us to cut it in a certain way, which Mindy, this art therapist, knew how to teach us how to do this, to create what we are calling a meandering journal. Um, this is a space for us to really reflect on. So this, I'm sorry, I should have said this retreat really focused on our first essential question, I should say. I was hoping, of course, your idea of what you're going to accomplish for me is always more than what happens, which is fine. So I thought we were going to get to the second question, but March 4th really was a time for us to sit in reflection around our own need for healing, each of us, what that looks like, where we are, um, and this body based body scan mindfulness activity allowed us to kind of to walk through that. So, in addition, we pulled the words that came out of our body scan and integrated them and created a haiku, which you could see on the next slide if you want to pop over there, Bree, just for a moment. So as a way to sort of just like integrate our learning, honor our learning, and be present for what came up for us, this haiku was generated, which was uncertain winds blow, yet we hold with loving care, healing in release. And so you could pop back to the other slide very real quick. So this was day one, realizing that we were going to need more time to really lean into part two of the retreat, which was the second question. And so on April 9th, we met with a reflective consultant, someone I worked with in my infant mental health days. And she led us through a 90-minute reflective session. And during this session, and we will have another one coming up next week. You could pop to the next slide. We're just reflected on our learning and our awareness and our experience of being together in the retreat and being in reflection. And what we found was that like all of this sort of nautical language started coming forward, this idea of like, what are our lighthouses and, what's our North Star and kind of how do we find hope and renewal and healing during sort of, these rocky waves and like just it just sort of started flowing from us. And so what came out of that was this idea that after what we've been through as a department, both personally, each of us, we all hold right our own collective experience of grief, but also as a school, what is our North Star? Like, how do we move forward in renewal at this time with what we've gone through, with what we've known from where we are now? What does our school need for repair? And so as some of our next steps, we will be I actually was able to budget for next year 6 sessions with this reflective consultant so that we can really just build this in, similar hopefully to the fellowship model, our own version of this, and to be able to really have this predictable time to reflect and connect to where we are and what our community needs, and how we continue to work through grief and loss in our community. I guess I'll just say lastly, as a piece of sort of the power of this work, the next day I received an email after our April 30th, I'm sorry, April 9th reflective consultation. I received an email from one of the members of my department, a licensed clinical social worker, and I added the email to our handout. But essentially what she was saying is like, thank you so much for the space, right? Because it's the space for ourselves where we can be held, where we can be vulnerable, where we can attune, that allows us to be able to be present and attune and sit with the grief of others. So I think for now, I will leave us with that. I feel very honored to have been a part of this fellowship, and I'm grateful for everyone's support and mentorship. So thank you.
Let's give Cathann some emoji loves, some snaps, some reactions in our Zoom boxes, and just naming like the beautiful space that you created for your team to help them process and feel and exist. And I also like just feel that same care even as you were presenting your story and journey with us in this moment. So really grateful for the way that you seem to just create beautiful spaces wherever you go, which is a gift. So thank you for sharing. Um, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to keep us moving forward. And I'm going to turn it over to Cherry, who's going to share about teachers having more power than they realize, which as a former educator, that fills my soul with joy. So, Cherry, take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cherry Melissa Price, and I am an educator in Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland. Um, and I'm in my house right now, which is really maybe 1 minute from Washington, D.C. If I go to the next light, I'm in Washington, D.C. You go back to the first slide though. Great. And just a little bit about PG County. It's the second largest school district in Maryland, and we have 133,000 students, and we have over 200 schools and centers. And I've been with the school system all my career. This is my 27th year. I say I'm an educator because I've held a variety of positions. The first 10 years, I was a social studies high school teacher. I love social studies. I was talking to a social studies teacher today, so I'm always going to love social studies. Then about midpoint of my career, my mom got sick. I took a step back from the classroom. But in 2021, I went back to school, and last year I graduated with a master's in trauma and resilience in educational settings. So that's what brings me to this work. My capstone project was on trauma-informed interventions in early childhood classrooms. And so my capstone, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, Bree. Okay, so my capstone, the definition that SCRR has, I just want to pull it up on my phone, about trauma really resonates with me because ever since I started learning about trauma, I really wanted to try to embrace this responsibility to especially help colleagues to be able to create those conditions, climates, and cultures that empower themselves and one another to be able to address trauma when the need arises. So next slide, please, Bree. So that's what my project is about, that teachers can be leaders in supporting students coping with trauma when the need arises. This is important to me because um, often teachers think that's not my job. I'm a teacher, I teach content, dealing with trauma and crisis. That's for the guidance counselor, that's for the special ed people, that's for the social worker. And most importantly, I don't have the time. There's only 7 hours in a school day. We're dealing with learning loss after COVID. And those are all valid concerns. They really are. And I was a classroom teacher for 10 years. I forgot to mention in January, I was promoted as a crisis intervention resource teacher. So now I'm in a middle school trying to give technical assistance to teachers on dealing with trauma with students. So I started thinking about how can I do this? Because there's, as you all know, there's still a lot, even though there's been a wide range of study in the field about trauma, even since after the ACEs study, there's still a lot of people who are not accepting of the science about the prevalence of trauma, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, how can I motivate school staff to use available school and school system resources to assist and support students when they observe not just academic deficits, but social, emotional, and mental deficits as well? Because I get many teachers that tell me they know something's wrong. They either don't know how to address it, they don't want to address it, they don't have time to address it, and so forth. So I started thinking about that. And so you can go to the next slide. So what I did was one of my fellows in the program said, why don't you do a survey of your staff to see if they know what is even available in the school system, that they can, what resources are available. The results were stunning, right? I don't have time to get into it, but it was all like 50, 60, 70% over didn't even know like what a PPW was, or that we even had a social worker in the school, and let alone the resources out, that were at the school board and different things. So what I decided to do was I did a PowerPoint presentation with the principal's permission at one of our staff meetings. Um, that just showed a variety of school resources that we have, such as me, the mental health clinician, the social worker, the PPW, um, the county health office, community schools, and just a litany of resources. But what I did was, and these are places that they can refer students and families to. Each slide had a brief blurb, the website address, the contact person, and the phone number. And then what I did is I shared the PowerPoint with them, and I also put it in a Google Drive, right? And then I also did a printout that they could put right by their desk. So this was not something that they had to tell any extra details. Just, what do you think's wrong? And then share, this is a resource for the family or for the student. It just empowered them to do a little bit more, just to do a little bit more. So often teachers, they don't want to be told something. They want to be shown, okay, well, what can I do? Do you have something for me? Right? Something readily accessible. When I was a teacher, that's how I was. I can't tell you how many workshops I would go to and be like, well, how can I use this? Right? How is it practical value for me? And so I learned that I need to work with and collaborate with colleagues and school system offices and departments in order to share their roles with my colleagues and how to access their services. I would put a little asterisk by that. It's interesting about this capstone. I called a couple of these offices to get some more information. I didn't get any callbacks, right? I had to do my own research myself, and I just did it, right? So that's what I did. And then I said, what I just said is how I did the presentation, everything. But another one of my fellows here, Michelle, she said, why don't you see if you can try to do this in service again in August when new teachers come back? Because new teachers come back before the old teachers. Sorry, old teachers. The new teachers come back first, and any like brand new teachers and any people that's new to the building, and then anybody else who wants to attend, so to get that information to them. So the principal agreed that we're going to do that, and then we're even thinking of how we can get it to other schools in our cluster, because we have clusters. So like the high school, that's our feeder school, the elementary school below us, and how we can do that. So we're working on that. We have to get the area office's permission to do that. Next slide, please, Bree, which is the last. So what I invite you all to do, any teachers or just even anyone else who's doing trauma-informed work, when you recognize that your colleagues feel empowered, feel powerless, like I can't do this work, I'm not, I don't have a degree in trauma or psychology, I'm not a mental health person. Do the work for them, do some of the work for them. Find out what tools or resources available in your communities, because most likely you're going to know more than they do about that, because this is what we do, right? And then share those tools with them, those contacts, make it accessible. Give them a Google Drive, give them a handout, give them a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not very creative, but I know a lot of you can make slides or make posts, whatever you think you can do to make something handy. Is it possible that you can collaborate and share with other departments in your organization, or cross share with other departments or organizations, and then offer that information to new hires, offer it as a refresher course? And you can empower your colleagues to feel their own power, because they now have the information they need. My I didn't have this right side, or I don't know if it's your right or your left, but where it says my own now what, I didn't have this at first. And Leora was like, you need to put not just now what in general, but what is your own now what. So like I was saying at the beginning, I've always wanted to inspire colleagues to believe that they can be not just educators, but trauma-informed educational leaders. And that's stumped me for some time. And so the light, like the second slide I think I had with the lady with the light bulb eventually went off, and it's like I have to be the one to give them the tools they need to be trauma informed leaders. And then I found this quote from Education Teacher Week that kind of sums it up. The best teacher leaders foster leadership among their colleagues. And that's about it.
Cherry, thank you
Very
so much. Team, can we give some cheers in the chat, some emoji reactions, some silent applause, just to express gratitude and just naming and appreciating the collaborative spirit that is just woven throughout your presentation and that desire to say, hey, like I know I have the tools and my role allows me to have them. So what can I do to make them accessible for you so you can do the right work even in spaces where you're overwhelmed and don't feel like you have the time? So really, really grateful for your insights and ahas on that, Cherry. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And again, as a reminder, we'll have space for overall questions. You can ask all the fellows or individual fellows your questions. And so please feel free to dig into that, jot those notes down, and we'll make space at the end. But what I'd love to do and I'm eager to do now is I'm going to turn it off to the incomparable Wendy to bring some insights to us now. And Wendy, you might want to come off mute and then restart. That'd be awesome.
Yep, no, I thought you were going to do that.
Perfect.
Sorry. Good afternoon. My name is Wendy Wolff, and I just really want to just say that I'm so honored to be part of this fellowship project and experience and to share my capstone project today with you. I also just want to thank you, SCRR, and all the amazing staff and all the fellows and all that I've learned along this 8-month fellowship experience and all that was done to make today possible. So I'm going to share a little bit about my background, and my capstone project took a very different turn. I've heard that from many of my fellows. I've been a school counselor for over 20 years. And about 7 years ago, I left the field of education. I think I was a helper who didn't learn or was never taught, I'm not sure which or both, to care for myself or to take care of myself. So I left the field feeling really depleted, very lost, and I would say with a profound sense of failure. I was a mom of 3 adopted, challenging kids. So I don't know how much of it was balancing my personal and my professional life, but I know that a lot of it was the things that I'll be talking a little bit about in just, I think, themes that show up in the education field. As I moved through sort of my own recovery journey and began sharing my story with others, I started finding hope and healing from other educators who shared story after story of very similar experiences that they had in their own educational career. So I started to wonder if and how we can create professional learning spaces that can help educators do their hard and important work from a more sustainable and centered place, that we don't experience this feeling of depletion and sort of the scarcity mindset versus the abundant mindset. I'm going to share a little bit about my journey through this fellowship experience. So 3 years ago, I returned to the education field as a school-based grief counselor with an amazing organization in Minneapolis, Minnesota called Growing Through Grief. She's my boss is my previous supervisor is actually one of the fellows among us. As I re-entered the field, I had this deep awareness that I needed to do better in taking care of myself so that I could take better care of the students and families that I was working with. But I also had this new awareness that I needed to also take care of the other adults in the room. And this was something that I didn't really know how or what to do with that awareness, but I knew that it was true. And then just really learning how to, for myself, how to redefine what is enough. That was another part. So in the last year, I actually moved again up to Duluth, Minnesota, and I'm now working in a lovely charter school in near Duluth, Minnesota, that is an outdoor education focus. It's in the woods with a deep care for the environment and learning in the beauty of the natural world. And I have to say that I didn't know how much I needed this change. And I feel like I found my people and my place in my career. And it's been really and kind of a new healing experience for me. So for my capstone project, I decided to facilitate a staff development session originally titled Filling Our Own Cup, Comprehensive Self-Care Strategies for School-Based Professionals. So that was what I was planning to do when I began my work and research and all of it. But after delving into the research and kind of gathering my materials and reflecting on all had been learning in the fellowship in the last 8 months, I changed my session title about a week before the training to Finding Our Collective Well-Being. And there's no way in this short amount of time that I can explain how transformational that just little change in verbiage and words has done for me. But it was really a powerful shift for me in that self-care is for sure important, but caring for one another and having a collective sense of well-being in our schools and our communities and our districts in our professional relationships is, I think, even more important. So shifted the title. And I think that learning has been due to a lot of what I've been learning in my fellowship, the idea of collective well-being and becoming healing-centered organizations. Um, 2 days before the training, I deleted. You can turn it free. Thank you. 2 days before my training, I deleted over half my content. And this also it's been sort of a pattern for me of never enough. So like all of these wonderful quotes, all of these wonderful resources, all of these things. And I think that I've been learning again in my own self-discovery and self-awareness is that sometimes it's the simple things that are sometimes the most powerful. And sometimes those simple things are also the most challenging to implement or really like delve into. So I deleted about half my content and decided to really just focus on this one idea of how do we understand our own stress cycles and find ways to stay in our window of tolerance. So this was really my only visual aid that was actually really powerful for me when I was thinking about what would I've wanted my younger self to have known about caring for myself while caring for others, oftentimes who are in dealing with traumatic things. So instead of teaching, I really shifted everything to focus on creating a space for a few reflection questions, and I gave groups time to discuss and connect and really share their stories with one another, which is very different than this sort of presenting information or new information. I even carved out 30 minutes in the middle of the session for people to just do and be and do what they needed or do what they wanted. And I saw people go for walks together. They colored together. They sat on the floor and did yoga together. So I abandoned a lot of my outcomes and objective slides and even some of my beautiful bulleted point lists of very well researched self-care strategies. And instead, I just invited people to share really from their own experiences and their own wisdom. I de-centered myself, which is a new word for me, but something that I've been exploring. De-centered myself and just really observed and listened. And it was really transforming for me as a presenter, a trainer, a counselor, teacher. I was even thinking as a mom, to stand back and really let people learn from one another. I'm going to just tell you just a few things that happened in this day. or this time together that I think was kind of
Hey,
game
Wendy,
changers.
I'm
Yeah.
so sorry to interrupt. I didn't know if you saw my chat. If you could, when you look at your notes, can you just speak a little bit closer to the camera? Because your
Yeah.
voice fades when you turn away, and I'm missing beautiful nuggets and I'm trying to capture notes.
No, thank you for telling me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so we broke up into about 6 groups, and I had 6 teachers who were table leaders, which is really lovely because they were colleagues of these teachers and staff. And I had met with them ahead of time to sort of prepare them to lead with curiosity and vulnerability. But the first question that we really delved into is, what does burnout feel like to you? And the words that came up were exhausted, overwhelmed, stressed. None of these are probably surprising to any of us. Overworked, unappreciated, lacking less than, pressure, heavy, failure, defeated, hopeless. Sort of this idea of never enough. And I had put puzzles on each of the tables so that with missing pieces, and that became sort of our grounding kind of visual of oftentimes when we're working with students in schools and families with complicated scenarios and trauma, we don't always have all the pieces. We're not always working with the whole picture, and sometimes that can sort of reinforce this idea that we never have everything we need and keep us in that scarcity mindset. After we sort of all shared sort of those feelings of what does burnout feel like, there was a little bit of this collective sigh. And it was really powerful. And I think there was sort of a shared experience and this feeling that we weren't alone. Each group sort of spent some time thinking about how do they stay self-aware or aware of their own stress cycles, and what do they do or not do to keep themselves out of that hyperarousal where their stress level is very high, or the hypoarousal where we begin to shut down or withdraw from the stress. And they didn't provide many answers, which again is very the space to feel and connect with one another. So we did staff surveys, and I know my time is up. We did staff surveys, post-staff surveys, and 2 things came up that were really important lessons for me. And that was that people said that how important it was to just connect. We didn't have this long list of learning objectives, which I think so much of our staff development time is spent cramming ourselves with new information about testing, curriculum standards, protocols, all of that, instead of just connecting. And then the other part that was really, I think, empowering for the staff that participated was at the end of the session, I just turned some music on and we did 10 minutes of just writing down a list of things that we appreciated about our work environment, not to dismiss our frustrations or the needs for our systems to improve, just to take some time to focus on what is already good. And again, sometimes we cram our staff development trainings with information or problem solvings or solutions instead of celebrations. So as we are planning our calendar for next year in the leadership team, it's just been a really interesting conversation to talk about how do we incorporate more time for connection and appreciation and weave that into our practice and culture as a school so that we can be stronger together.
Mm.
Taking time to ask that, how are we doing? And so that we can be better prepared when crisis happens, because it will, um, to heal and recover as a community. So that is all my learning, and I thank you for this opportunity to share, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you,
Thanks, Bree, for
Wendy.
letting me go over a little bit.
Can we give some chat and appreciation, some emoji reactions, some silent claps for Wendy and sharing? And just naming, I think that that beautiful connection plus appreciation is such an important baseline because it builds such a real rapport and closeness, and that's raw and real. That is a good foundation for when we need to really rely on each other when we're in states of crisis. So I'd encourage you to go ahead and switch it to gallery mode if you're not already in there so you can see that. And I'd love to just take 2 seconds in the chat, just drop flowers for all 3 of our presenters, just give them gratitude and care. Um, and we have a little bit of space now, about 7 minutes before we get pulled back into the main space. for questions, ahas, additional clarity moments, things you'd like to share or ask with our three fellows. So, whatever those may be, feel free to take your time now, come off mute or put them in the chat and I can give voice to them. What questions do you have? Reflections do you have? Or what clarity do you need from our three fellows?
I don't have any specific questions, but I just want to say that you guys did an amazing job, and I loved how you went back to your different sites, organizations, or wherever you are, and really kind of implemented some of these things. It was really nice to hear and see the outcomes of that. So
Thank you. I just really love sort of a theme of really leaning into the adults and the educators and the caregivers. I mean, I think, yes, we are child-centered, schools are child-centered, but I think we have really come to realize that the educators and the adults in this school have been managing well beyond our capacity for a while now, right? I mean, what COVID did to schools and to kids and to educators and to the children, it has been a profound impact. And so I just am loving this, this collective awareness that we needed to really nourish and consider what the adult caregivers need if we are going to be able to kind of renew and recover and repair. There's no other way, right? We can't give from an empty cup. So I just love that, how that theme has come through in both sessions that I've been in.
I think it was somebody in the last round that said teachers are the most important resources in the building. And so without teachers, you have children, but you have nothing, because who's going to teach them? So we have to take care of them. So that is so important.
I presented in the last round, and I think that was one thing I did in my capstone through this whole thing. That's why I said I loved hearing that you guys have implemented it, because for mine, I'm in the starting phases and I never really got to put anything in place. And I'm in the process of working towards getting some things done next year. So, and for the staff. So when you were saying for the teachers and the staff, that's really where my focus is, because like you were saying, somebody said in script, many of us have been trained to support students. That's what we do. We go out and we advocate for them. We support them. We do everything for them. But our teachers take a lot in, and they also need some support. And so it's just a group that sometimes gets, they're the ones that slip through the cracks now, right? Sometimes. So
I can't
I
really
just,
I know I can't take credit for the sharing the in-service. That was Michelle's idea. But when she said that, that's what really made the light bulb go off for my personal struggles of how to convince teachers this work is important, is give them something instead of just trying to tell them or get them to read my mind, or because even I've done services where I show them the science, what trauma and ACEs does to brains and da 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 da. And I'm not even saying they don't believe it, but they need something concrete in their hand that they can use, call, email. You know what I'm saying? So they loved it. They loved it. They didn't feel that I was just talking at them. And like I said, how many of us have gone to these in services that put us to sleep, and it's good information, but how can we use it? Is it practical? So that's what I really, when Michelle said that, I was like, oh, this is great, and think about a brand new teacher, 21, 24 years old, that is totally overwhelmed, right, with everything else. And then they've got some resources for when a kid comes in and has death in the family, is acting up or whatever, and they're overwhelmed with everything else. They got something, oh, I can maybe call here or refer the family to this. You know what I mean? It would be great. It would really be great.
I love that, Cherry. Any other questions or final comments from any of our other attendees, things you're wondering, curious about, or even a takeaway you heard that you want to uplift back to the fellows? I used my good teacher wait time. Fellows, any final word? Oh, Roberta came off mute. Yes, Roberta.
Oh, I just wanted to echo, Wendy, you named it explicitly, but it was present in all three of your presentations, is the idea of offering the workshop and learning that we needed ourselves.
That we never got. Yes. A
Yeah.
lot of this, and you know, a lot of this comes with experience. You know, we've been through it. That's so true, Roberta. Yeah.
Yeah, Roberta, did you want to finish your thought? You're good. Okay, you feel complete. Excellent. Fellows, one word, one encouragement you want to give to folks in the minute before we head off. You got this, an affirmation. Got 53 seconds. Any final comments? Okay. All right, y'all. Drop some flowers in the chat. Head back to the main room. Thank you so much, fellows, for your brilliance and your wisdom.